House of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 74 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing the prologue of Clash of Kings.
Clash of Kings?
Is that right? Is that what it's called?
That feels like a whole new book.
It is! It is!
As always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We will summarise what happened, we'll discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll help you if you're not reading along with us, or if you are. Well, hello Mackelly, welcome to a new book, and to 2021.
Right, new book, new year. I'm just mostly excited that finally our episode numbers won't be quite as confusing as they have been.
That is true. There's going to be no confusing chapter 1 with episode 75.
Right.
Clearly, they're different things.
Finally, we hit payoff 74 episodes later.
Well, we've had a little bit of a break, but our listeners haven't.
No, they haven't.
So I don't think we can do the whole catch-up here, because this is the biggest chapter in the books. Surely in all 5 books. There can't be a longer chapter than this one. It's massive.
It's big.
It's like a whole story to itself.
Yeah. In the audiobook version, this chapter is 72 minutes long.
Wow.
Yeah.
God blimey.
I know.
How are we going to keep this one under an hour?
I don't think we will very well.
All right. So, we've talked enough about the reasons we can't talk. Let's get down to business. Now, normally we start with a recap of what just happened, but this is a prologue with new characters, so nothing's happened to these characters, and I'm not going to recap all of Game of Thrones. So
that would take longer than an hour.
Yes. Let's skip on to the summary, Mackelly.
Okay. A white raven has arrived at Dragonstone, heralding the end of summer. Winter is coming. Maester Cresson, despite his learning and wisdom, struggles not to be scared by the combination of the raven, the red comet, and a stirring of Dragonmont, the volcano that is the mother of Dragonstone.
King Stannis Baratheon's daughter, Princess Shireen, and her misshapen fool Patchface come to visit. She is a sad, gentle figure, 9 years old, and disfigured by grayscale to an already not that great face. He shows her the raven, and she tells how she has heard that the comet is a sign that dragons are alive. She's scared of the castle's decorations. There's a lot of dragon motifs on Dragonstone.
Right.
The story of the dragons being alive came from a servant who in turn heard it from the Red Woman, Melisandre of Ashai. Cresson is annoyed.
Cresson, after a long aside on Patchface's origin story, is informed by Maester Pylos that Davos Seaworth has returned and has met with Stannis all night. Cresson again is annoyed. He has to climb a bunch of steps and in the process meets Sir Davos Seaworth on the way. Davos has just returned from the Stormlands, having been looking for allies, and not successfully. Renly has been the Lord of Storm's End for a decade, and the Lords had developed a loyalty to the younger brother. Renly has claimed the throne, appointed the Kingsguard, not the White Cloaks, but the Rainbow Cloaks. Cresson recalls that Renly was all too fond of playing games and being the center of attention as a child.
After another digression, this time on Sir Davos' origin story, Cresson arrives at the chamber of the Painted Table. Things don't go great with Stannis. The king harps on about Renly getting Storm's End while he held Dragonstone. The surrounding islands cannot supply the men one would need to take the Iron Throne. Cresson argues that a man was needed to hold Dragonstone, and Renly was but a boy. He still is, muses Stannis. The rightful king seeks advice. Cresson reminds him that the Lannisters are the true enemy, for now they should make common cause with Renly. Stannis point blank refuses. Cresson posits a partnership with the new king in the north, Robb Stark. This is obviously the first time he's ever met Stannis. Stannis refuses.
Yes. Scraping the ideas barrel, Cresson suggests a marriage of Shireen to Robert Arryn. Stannis doesn't think Lysa will send Robert to Dragonstone, but agrees to consider sending Shireen to the Eyrie. At this point, Selyse, Stannis' wife, arrives. Think of her like Stannis without the easygoing nature and playful smile. She offers House Florence 2,000 swords, but he is skeptical given that they owe fealty to Highgarden. Selyse has bought into the Red Woman's religion of the Lord of Light R'hllor. Melisandre has seen Renly's death in the flames, and that would lead to Stannis' force being considerably bolstered by the forces of both the Reach and the Stormlands.
Cresson is dismissed and exhausted. He's 80 years old. His loyalty to the Baratheons won't countenance the fratricide that's being discussed, and he determines to get rid of Melisandre. He retrieves a package of purple crystals from his lab. The poison is known as the Strangler and chokes its victims. He takes a nap. Cresson wakes to find that he's late for dinner. Maester Pylos has left him sleeping, and that it was felt that his rest was more useful than his counsel. He hurries to catch up. He discovers Pylos in his seat, and he himself is banished to a distant chair, far from Stannis' ear. Patchface knocks him down, and the gathered laugh at him.
Melisandre helps him up, but gives him Patchface's bucket and antler helmet, and the laughter intensifies. Cresson surveys his tormentors. They are second-rate lords in gaudy clothes. Only Sir Davos is plainly dressed, and he's also the only one who will hold his gaze, although with pity. Melisandre sits in a place of high honor, and Stannis announces that Pylos will assume the Maester's duties going forward. Cresson is heartbroken, or I could say Cresson is crestfallen, I guess.
Oh, very nice.
He loved Stannis as a child because, well, nobody else did.
Cresson makes one last plea, but is rebuffed by Melisandre. He appears to concede and offers to share a cup with her to toast R'hllor's power, a cup he slipped the poison into. Davos, sensing what's going on, tries to stop him, but Cresson persists. Melisandre offers him an out that he also refuses. She drinks most of the wine, giving Cresson only a small amount. He swallows his fear and the last of the wine. As he chokes, the ruby at her throat glows, and she assures him that her god really does have power. As Cresson dies, Melisandre is unaffected.
Oh, man. Yeah. Cresson, man, he seemed like such a good guy, too, you know?
Well, I mean, really... unless you're Melisandre.
Well, true, he was trying to kill her. It's just, this was kind of a heart-wrenching chapter in some ways, because he clearly loves Stannis so much. And, you know, his internal monologue, you hear how heartbroken he is in the way that he's being treated by Stannis. And then it ends with him dying with a fool's crown on his head, choking on the poison that he put in the cup.
Yeah.
But our longtime listener and friend of the show, Lewis from Northern Ireland, will be excited because he has told us before that Stannis is his favorite character. So I'm sure he's happy to finally get Stannis into the book in more than just reference.
Yeah. But it's, well, we don't know if he's going to be a POV character yet. We this is not a POV chapter. I mean, obviously it was Cresson's point of view all the way through, but the chapters are named for a person, and this one is just called the prologue. So
right, yeah.
But hopefully someone in this group will become a POV character, because I'd like to keep an eye on them.
It would be good if they didn't just blink out of existence for us.
So, looking back on this, Maester Cresson has been with the Baratheons since before Robert was king. He's almost 80. Pylos, we mentioned Pylos a couple of times in that summary. He's a Maester too. He's basically been sent to replace him, sort of like... What happens in this chapter is exactly the reason Pylos has been sent. It is to put Cresson out to seed, basically.
Yes, right.
Does beg the question, does Maester Aemon, who's 20 years older, know anything about this deal?
Yep. That is a good question right there.
When he gets the White Raven, could he send it back with it? Could you send the White Raven back in the arms of a new Maester, preferably one in his 20s, please?
Right. It does, does make you wonder why there's no understudy for Maester Aemon at Castle Black. I was thinking maybe Mormont has to officially request that or something, but
So is it mentioned here? Did Stannis request the replacement?
No, it does mention that Cresson fell and broke his hip, while he was infirmed, they sent a replacement. Right. But he knew that the replacement was being sent to eventually replace him. But, each sunrise is a gift with Maester Aemon at the Night's Watch. So, it's time to get a succession plan in place here.
Yeah.
And they've had 20 years longer to do it.
Right, yes. He doesn't need to fall and break his hip to be frail. He's 100 years old.
Right. But one thing I noticed, this chapter opens with Cresson standing on his balcony of his chamber, and he's standing between a hellhound on one side and a wyvern on the other side. And I just kind of wondered if there was some symbolism going on there. Like a hellhound you might consider to be like a direwolf, and a wyvern is a two-legged dragon. So he's standing between a direwolf and a dragon. And I don't know, that I just picked up on that and wondered if that was intentional.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it, but
It could have been any mythical. I mean, the dragon, I guess, makes sense. They literally are on Dragonstone. So there's dragons everywhere. But, the hellhound, the dragon on the other side.
Yeah. It's the tricky thing with any symbolism in this book is that there's so many symbols.
Oh, yeah.
That, you can almost always find something.
Yep. Exactly.
So a White Raven has arrived. They bring special messages. This one reports that summer has ended. Doesn't seem like the best time for war to break out in the realm. They really need to be harvesting and storing because they historically long summers presage long winters. So
exactly.
They're going to need.
And meanwhile, Tywin's got Gregor Clegane and Armory Lord Vargo Hoat out there burning the Riverlands. So, luckily though, I think a lot of the food comes from the Reach, which has not yet been touched by war. So, got that going for them.
Again, just going back to something I've said like a bunch of times over the course of this, I don't know why the Reach gets involved in politics.
Right.
If I were them, I would seal my borders and say, "Look, you really can't attack us because we're growing the food you're going to need for the winter,
and the wine."
Yeah, the food and the wine, exactly. You squabble amongst yourselves. We'll keep selling our stuff at the highest possible price.
Right. Fat and happy and drunk often enough. Right. As not, I guess.
But they've even gone on a sort of Hail Mary because they've gone on the Renly train.
Right.
And he is the least likely to win this.
That is a Hail Mary because he's got no claim whatsoever.
Right.
As long as his older brother's alive, he has no claim.
Right. Yeah.
But I was thinking about Cresson. I was thinking about Cresson thinking about that these long summers are often followed by possibly even longer winters. And so he mentions that this summer lasted like 10 years, 2 months, and 16 days or something like that. And that means that this winter could be longer than 10 years. And I went back and looked up info on the Long Night, which is when the others came down from the north and the Night's Watch was founded for pushing them back. And it's, it said that it went on 4 years. It is not very specific, but I thought this might not be the best of times for the Night's Watch, whose primary job for the past 8,000 years has been to wait for the others to come back and defend the realm, to be riding in force north of the wall. 8,000 years you've been waiting to do this one job.
Yes. So Princess Shireen, so that would be Stannis and Selyse's daughter. I say Shireen, Mackelly says Shireen. He listens to the book on tape, so maybe he knows something more than I do.
I probably go with Shireen. Yeah, do I say Shireen? Yeah, I guess
you say Shireen.
Yeah, I never thought about it.
To me, it sounds kind of Australian when you say it, like Shireen.
Shireen?
Shireen. She seems a very sad character. She's lonely, of course, being practically the only child on Dragonstone.
Yeah.
She's mutilated by Grayscale.
Yeah, we did some background on Grayscale back in Sansa 4. Well, technically we did it on the Grey Plague, which is the faster cousin of Grayscale. However, if you survive Grayscale, then you're immune to the Grey Plague. So you got that going for you, I guess.
Glass half full, Shireen. Glass half full.
Right. All about perspective.
So basically her face is sort of like grey and broken, and it looks and feels like stone. That's the way this reveals itself.
Yes.
And that's not very nice. And apparently it stretches from her cheek down her neck.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
But he thinks that she's been denied too often, and I thought, well, that seems quite different from her cousins in King's Landing, the Baratheon, or should I say Lannister kids. They don't seem to be denied much at all in any way.
Yeah.
And another thing he's thinking while he's meeting with Shireen is that her sadness is my shame, another mark of my failure. And I found that to be curious because we get no more than that. We get no more information about why her sadness is his shame and a mark of his failure. So we'll have to keep an eye on maybe if we get more explanation on that.
Well, just throwing out an idea here, he does talk later on about Pylos, his replacement, as being too earnest and too
serious.
Not jovial enough,
Yeah.
too serious, exactly.
Yeah.
And he says that, particularly Dragonstone, the place, and Stannis, the man that he is, the Maester needs to bring a bit of life and happiness to the place. And so maybe that's all he's thinking about. I mean, just looking for a simpler explanation.
Right.
Maybe
he's too old and frail to provide the jovial environment that might be more to her liking.
Right.
Okay, I could see that. Yeah. I was thinking maybe it had something to do with this grayscale infection, that he didn't catch it earlier, or, maybe he was some way responsible for causing it or something. And then I even thought that maybe as he kind of considers himself the de facto father figure of the Baratheon boys after their father Stefan dies, and I wondered if maybe he in some way helped to broker the marriage between Stannis and Selyse, and he was thinking, if I had found a more upbeat, positive woman, maybe there'd be a happier marriage and we'd have a happier kid on our hands.
Yeah, so Selyse comes across in a fairly dour light in this chapter. I wonder, and this might be spoiler, or it might be something we could only guess at, but do you think that she's become more joyless in recent years? Or do we have a feeling that she was always a bit like this ever since she married Stannis?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we don't know much about her yet, but she has been stuck on Dragonstone for like 15 years.
Right,
so.
which could leech the fun out of one's soul.
Right. And she's married to Stannis, who's not exactly the life of the party.
Right.
In fact, when Cresson's coming into the dining hall late and everybody's there eating, he thinks there's no merriment and, festive environment going on with the men down on the lower levels because Stannis doesn't allow that kind of stuff. Like we saw at Robert's feast at Winterfell, it was a big raucous affair. None of that's happening here on Dragonstone. But so Stannis doesn't seem that fond of anybody, quite honestly. But he doesn't seem especially fond of his wife. And I wondered if maybe he's never wanted to get married like Brendan Tully, or maybe he wanted to marry someone else, and so he feels trapped in this loveless marriage. We don't know. We barely know anything about these two, but it started me thinking about their marriage. And so they were married after Robert's rebellion, which means he was the oldest brother to the king. And so why marry... I'm going to put in quotes here, such a catch, because we're talking about Stannis. But from his position in Westeros, he's quite the catch. Why marry?
Yeah. I mean, at the time of their marriage, he was second in line. He was first in line to the throne, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think they were married probably right around the time that Joffrey was born, but still, pretty elevated position in the realm. Why marry him to House Florent? A house that can only raise about 2,000 swords. And I think the reason is because the Tyrells, who the Florents currently own fealty to, fought for the Targaryens. So maybe marrying his younger brother to the House Florent is kind of just a reminder to the Tyrells that, hey, if you don't stay loyal to me, you could be replaced as Lord Paramount of the Mander and Wardens of the South. Maybe there could be a flip-flop in power.
Yep.
That was my thought anyway.
No, I agree. I think that's probably why it was done, because you're absolutely right. The Florents aren't a serious enough house for the younger brother of the king to marry.
Right, not nowadays. Back in the day, they were much more powerful. But
you mean the House Florent was? Yeah,
House Florent. Yes, exactly.
Right, but at the time of Robert's rebellion, they weren't. But this has brought them back up a notch, and you're right. It feels like a slap to the Tyrells to keep them in check.
Yeah,
which obviously the Tyrells don't take too personally, because
yeah, I guess
or maybe
not.
maybe they do actually. Maybe this is why they've sided with Renly.
Maybe, yeah.
They actually feel that if they side with Renly, and Renly gets the upper hand in all this, they've chosen the right Baratheon, and they can cement their position as Lords of the Reach.
Yeah, I see where you're going.
Yeah. So Shireen's worried that dragons are coming to eat her. Basically, the red comet apparently is a sign of this. This rumour has got to her from overhearing servants talking, but the origin of it is Melisandre, which is interesting that she thinks that.
Right, yeah.
And that she's sharing it with people.
That Melisandre's sharing.
Right,
this.
yeah. I mean, she has this idea. She sees they all see the comet, but Melisandre says, "Oh, that's dragons right there." And she's from Ashai, and Ashai is sort of like supposed to be the home of dragons. You know, this is where they think the dragons came from, or at least I think early on in the Game of Thrones, it was said that people believed that dragons still existed in if you go as far east as Ashai.
Yeah, east of Ashai. I think that's where Bran saw dragons stirring in his dream.
Right, exactly, yeah. So, but obviously, to a 9-year-old, that's fairly terrifying, especially a 9-year-old who lives in amongst millions of stone dragons.
Right, and there is a very eerie red comet that can be seen even in the daylight going across the sky.
And if you position your head just right, you can get sort of like the comet to look like fire coming out of the mouth of one of the stone dragons.
Right. Yeah. Of course, this conversation between the two of them feels a bit like possible foreshadowing, as Dany is, she's thinking that she wants to reassert her claim to the Iron Throne, and she does have real dragons. So, Cresson says dragons can't come.
There are dragons. Melisandre is right. Her god does have power.
Cresson says dragons can't come to life. They're made of stone. And of course, we saw stone dragon eggs hatch and hatch live dragons. So, definitely.
So Shireen's only companion is Patchface, the jester, for want of a better term. The backstory that we skipped over in the recap is that he was found in Essos by Stannis' father, Steffon Baratheon, while he was out there seeking a wife for Rhaegar Targaryen, presumably before Rhaegar married Elia Martell.
Yeah, because he had no sisters to marry, so...
Yes, that's right. Steffon wrote back to Cresson at Storm's End that he'd found Patchface, who was an amazing entertainer, and was going to bring him back with him to Storm's End. The journey ultimately failed. They didn't find a wife for Rhaegar, and ended in tragedy because Steffon's ship was sunk within sight of Storm's End. Patchface was one of the very few survivors. By the letter that Steffon wrote, he used to be clever, he could dance, he could sing, spoke languages, but he was 3 days shipwrecked before he washed up on the shore, and this cost him his senses. The gibberish that he now speaks hints at sort of some near-death experience in the sea and magical creatures within the sea.
Right.
So it's all very disconcerting, and I can't imagine that anyone would enjoy his company. But apparently, Shireen Baratheon...
When there's no other options, right. Patchface seems like the belle of the ball.
Yeah. And he continually sings a song which goes, "The shadows come to dance, the shadows come to stay." And Shireen admits that this song scares her.
Yeah.
And if she'd read Game of Thrones, she'd be really scared of what this means.
Yeah. She says, I've asked him to stop singing it, and he won't make him stop. And Cresson's like, well, there's not much I can do about it. And he says, maybe, by tomorrow he'll be singing some other song. Yeah. That's about the best he can reassure her. And I know I agree with you. You have written here that the song seems to, be foreshadowing for others / winter coming. And
Right.
I agree, that's the likely what we're supposed to get out of this song, because he sings it all the time. So it seems like it's got to mean something. But I was doing some outside the box thinking, if you will. He's shaking his head because he knows that's always dangerous when I try and think outside the box. And I came up with a possible alternative scenario. Could Patchface's song have been warning Cresson of his fate if he continues down the path of trying to poison Melisandre? Or Melisandre. How do you say it? Melisandre.
I give it a little dr at the end.
Yeah.
I go for Melisandre.
That's how Roy Dotrice does it in the audiobook too, but I'm too American. I'm too American. I have to say Melisandre. So Cresson is planning on killing Melisandre. So he openly denies the power of R'hllor. And so he's denying the power of R'hllor, and he's trying to kill a priestess of the Lord of Light. And the opposition to light is shadow, which Mary Masdor said the grave casts a long shadow, back before she herself was in the grave. Although she wasn't in the grave, actually, she was burnt to a crisp. But
yes.
And Selyse, toward the end of the chapter, refers to R'hllor as the god of flame and shadow. So maybe he's insinuating, R'hllor's power is here in Westeros. Stop what you're doing. Don't go through with the plan you're going to hatch here. Anyway, it's just a thought I had.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. Although honestly, I'd find it more compelling if he was saying the light is coming to stay.
Yeah, maybe that would be too obvious. They don't. We learned early from John Arryn that nobody says the obvious thing when they're trying to give someone a hint. Nobody says Joffrey's not your son. Instead, they say the seed is strong. Figure that one out.
If Patchface's song was "That red-haired lady's going to stop you from seeing your 81st birthday," that would be too clear. Yes, yeah.
Melisandre does say after Patchface sings that song at dinner, when they get tripped up, she says to Cresson, "Here's a riddle: a clever fool and a foolish wise man." And maybe she realizes that the song Patchface is singing is because of what
he has some
about
insight.
To do.
Yes,
yeah,
he has some insight, and that Cresson's soon-to-be actions are foolish, but maybe going back to the more obvious interpretation of what he's singing, she apparently has some ability to see things in the future. She believes she's foretold Renly's death. She believes that the comet signifies the coming of dragons. She maybe knows the danger coming from the north as well.
Yeah.
And so she's saying, the crazy guy with the antler helmet knows what he's talking about more than you do, Cresson.
Yep. That does seem like the leading candidate for what's being said. I just thought maybe we could play on that word shadow a little bit. And the shadow and the Lord of Light and their little battle they had at dinner.
And at that point, Melisandre drops in her catchphrase, which is that the night is dark and full of terrors. And it certainly was for Cresson.
Indeed it was, yes.
So then we also skipped over Sir Davos's backstory. We have touched on it previously.
A little bit, yeah. We've touched on the siege.
Yes, so when Stannis and Renly, but Renly was only a child, were besieged at Storm's End during Robert's Rebellion, the Tyrells and the Red Wines were surrounding them. There was no way to get food in. They were down to eating shoe leather and rats when they could catch them. Sir Davos smuggled fish and onions through the Red Wine blockade to feed them, and that basically saved them. They were going to starve to death. They were before Ned arrived to lift the siege. In thanks, Stannis chopped off 4 fingers of Sir Davos's hand for smuggling. Because I don't think for this particular act of smuggling. I think for previous crimes of smuggling.
Yes, previous transgressions.
Right. And Sir Davos now keeps those, they were cut off at the first knuckle, so there's just little stumps of fingers. He keeps them in a little leather pouch at his throat, sort of to remind himself of the fairness of Stannis. I've got to say, Sir Davos is a different breed than me.
I agree.
I can harbour a grudge about the tiniest slight. If someone lopped 4 of my fingers off, I would never forgive them.
Yeah. Yeah, we get a little glimpse into Stannis' character here. He rewards and punishes equally and separates them completely. Davos did a great deed by risking life and limb to smuggle in this food, and he was heavily rewarded. He was given lands, he was made a knight, and he's obviously now in Stannis' entourage here.
Inner circle.
But that great deed didn't offset the previous wrongs. So therefore, he was punished separately and rewarded separately. And if you remember, even Littlefinger said that forgiveness is not in Stannis' nature. Right. That was back when he said to Ned,
he was warning Ned about a Stannis becoming king.
Right, yeah. He wanted Ned to back Joff, and if Joff didn't work out, then put Renly on the throne.
Yeah. And you can see how that kind of rigidness, I mean, that's like Ned on steroids,
It is. It is like Ned on steroids.
Is not going to lead to a happy kingdom.
Right. Yeah. And we had talked about, I think it was in the 50th anniversary episode. It was actually, I think Lewis had asked us a question about what we thought the differences and similarities between Ned and Stannis were. And this action right here is definitely a major one. I don't think Ned would have lopped off a guy's fingers who saved him and all of his people in Winterfell.
Right. You see that as a offsetting,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Bad. You did bad. You made up for it by doing good.
Yeah.
So, but also, Eddard Stark going by Ned is I don't imagine Stannis goes by Stan very often. I don't imagine many of the folks. Probably Robert could have been the only one that got away with calling him Stan.
Yeah. But of course, this then, as you're saying this, you're thinking about how's he going to treat Renly here.
Yes.
Because there could hardly be a bigger transgression that your brother could commit than usurping the throne from you.
Right.
And can he find common cause? Can he forgive? Can they bury the hatchet?
Yep, those are all
feels like
really
the only
good
place
questions.
He's going to bury the hatchet is in Renly's fingers.
Right. Yeah, if Davos lost 4 fingers for smuggling, what is Renly going to lose for smuggling a throne?
Davos is concerned that Stannis is so rigid that he might take the meagre army that he's gathered to King's Landing and therefore get defeated, because obviously it's hard to win any battle when you're crossing the sea, because you're coming in seasick and bedraggled, and you're invading people who have the defensive positions. It's difficult to win any kind of battle like that, particularly when you're horribly outnumbered.
Now, what he can hope for is that Joffrey is just dumb enough to take the gold cloaks and go riding out either into the Reach or into the Riverlands and leave the entire city undefended. Then we might have different situation here.
Yep. Cresson suggests the alliances with both Robb and with the Arryns. That would give him the needed swords. The problem is Stannis' Stannisness kicks in, and now he can't ally with Robb Stark because Robb Stark has stolen the 7th of his kingdom.
Right.
Well, actually quite a bit more than that because of the size of the North.
Land, if you're talking just land mass, he's stolen nearly half of his kingdom.
Yeah.
He says, Cresson's response to that is, well, half a kingdom is better than none. Help Robb avenge his father. And he doesn't get to finish, but you get the idea that he's going to say, help Robb avenge his father, and he'll owe you. You guys can work out your disagreement here. But Stannis cuts him off and says, why should I avenge Eddard Stark? He was nothing to me. Oof. Stannis' claim is the reason that Ned is gone. His family is at war. One daughter's on the lam, the other is in prison because Ned fought for the right of Stannis' claim.
Right,
So,
but then this comes to a question that this chapter posed to me. Ned never did get his message to Stannis, did he?
he did not. No.
Now, I wonder if that would have changed the calculus, because if he got a letter from Ned Stark that said you're the rightful king and I'll support you, then that might, even Stannis might be swayed by that.
I agree.
At least to say, look, let's form an alliance with the Starks, let's win the kingdom back, and then I'm going to say to Robb Stark, this King in the North thing has to end now.
Right, yeah. Like,
You
listen,
actually,
help you. We'll end this. But then you got to go back to being Lord of Winterfell.
But he's literally right. If he'd never got any word from Ned, then Ned is nothing to him. Ned didn't,
right.
As far as Stannis knows, Ned never did a single thing to help Stannis.
Yes, and we know that. So he wrote the letter, gave it to Fat Tom, but Fat Tom died in the scene in the throne room when Ned was taken captive. So as best we know, the letter ended there. The letter never made it farther than Fat Tom. And we never got the full contents of the letter, but it did seem like the letter basically said, here's the proof that Joff was not King Robert's, your brother's son.
Yeah, but of course we believe that Stannis already knew all this, right? Because we believe Stannis knew it alongside Jon Arryn, because they were doing the investigation that Ned copied was already done by Stannis and Jon Arryn. So we think Stannis went to Dragonstone to start to formulate a plan for how he could succeed his brother Robert to the throne.
That's definitely one of the possible options, absolutely. He definitely went with Jon Arryn to the brothel and saw baby Bera, and he was along for the ride with Jon Arryn while Jon Arryn was following these clues. We don't know for a fact whether Stannis reached the final conclusion that Ned eventually did or not, but it certainly seems like he might have.
Okay, but just simple logical thing here. Why else is he claiming the throne unless he knows?
Right. Yes.
He must have that information, because otherwise he wouldn't claim the throne. He's Stannis Baratheon. He wouldn't be overreaching.
Right. He's got to do what's right and just.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Now he does give some good examples as to the injustices his older brother did him, and they're not subtle. I mean, he goes through them. He held Storm's End against the siege until Ned broke the siege, and he says, "Did my brother thank me for holding the castle during the siege and almost starving to death with our men? No, he thanked Ned for lifting the siege." He built. Stannis built a fleet and took it to Dragonstone on Robert's behalf to get the final little group of Targaryens completely wiped out. And did Robert thank him for doing that? No, he blamed Stannis for letting Willem Darry escape with Viserys and Daenerys. He also helped Jon Arryn rule the realm for 15 years while Robert did whatever in the world Robert wanted to do. And when Jon Arryn died, did he go to his brother and say, I want you to be my hand of the king since you've been helping run this realm for 15 years? No, he went north across the realm and named his buddy Eddard hand of the king. And I thought maybe that action right there is another possible reason that Stannis may have left King's Landing and gone to Dragonstone.
I hadn't really thought of that either, but...
Dude, what more can I do for you?
Yeah. But, yeah, I really hadn't thought about that, but it was possibly the final nail in the coffin of their relationship. So he's just storming off to Dragonstone in a sulk, in a pout.
Exactly. Like, hey, I've done everything you ask. I'm the person who should be named Hand of the King, and you're going to Eddard Stark, who, as he complains in this chapter, he loved like a brother. He's like, how many times did I hear that I was his brother? I'm his brother.
You mean you ignored him and slandered him, treated him like dirt?
Yeah, it probably would have worked out better for everyone if Stannis had been named Hand of the King, because then Ned would still be in Winterfell.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't want to come down anyway.
In fact, given the length of the journey north, I'm surprised Robert undertook it.
Right. He's like,
what I need is a hand of the king who is rigid and will keep me on the straight and narrow. And who should I ask?
Across
Stannis?
the realm.
Well, that does sound a lot like Ned Stark. You could try him.
Yeah. There's definitely, you get the sense there's definitely some envy of Ned in Stannis' words. And, you know, in Stannis' defense, those were some significant slights there.
They were.
But Robert seemed like the kind of person who made decisions based on how much he liked someone, and he didn't seem to care much for Stannis.
No, that's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
So Cresson suggests the alliance with Lysa Arryn, given that it's believed that Cersei killed Lysa's husband Jon Arryn, she would want revenge.
Yeah. Again. I took what? How?
You're going to mention how many people know that secret now, yes?
Why did she bother writing it in secret code in a special box with a false bottom to give to Kat if she's just out there spreading this news far and wide?
There are dragons. She could now do skywriting.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, how many people know about this secret? Now, first of all, we get the impression that Cresson has been on Dragonstone the whole time. He doesn't seem like he came to King's Landing with Stannis, that he stayed. He just seems very familiar. He says when he first got to Dragonstone all those years ago, he was kind of frightened and didn't like the stone dragons and gargoyles and stuff, and now he considers them kind of friends. So you get the feeling he's been there for quite a long time. So he didn't even get that info from King's Landing. So maybe Stannis got that word and brought it over when he went back to Dragonstone, but, I mean, who doesn't know about this? It's the worst kept secret in Westeros.
That's what the red comet is.
Right? It's going to start writing in the sky. Now, Cersei and Jaime did talk about Lysa's accusations before, and I'm using air quotes around accusations because we don't know what they were, before pushing Bran out the window back in Bran 2, but we never heard what accusations they were referring to.
And they certainly could either be accusations of Joffrey's parentage or of murdering Jon Arryn. Those are both things that they could be accused of.
Right, yeah. It just seems unlikely that she would be telling people around King's Landing that Cersei killed Jon Arryn, but then Robert never finds out, and Cersei and Jaime just stand by and do nothing with her spreading these kind of rumors. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this secret really does seem to get out organically,
right? Weirdly. Next thing you know, the wildlings are going to be, like, hey, did you hear?
The others.
My first thought when he proposed this marriage between Shireen and Robert Arryn was, oh no, not sweet Shireen. She doesn't need to be messing with that whack pack up in the Eyrie. She suffered enough, hasn't she?
They're not the best, yeah. So, Selyse tries to bolster Stannis' reserve in case it was flagging. She says that it's not fitting for a king to plead and bargain for what's his. He shouldn't have to send requests for fealty. They should just fall to their knees. She doesn't understand the real politic, though, here.
Yeah.
They're clearly not in a very good situation, and Stannis is not making life better for himself. He needs to be more adaptable here.
Right. Yeah, I don't think that talking to the Arryns about... He's not even given Lysa Arryn an opportunity to pledge her fealty to him. You send an envoy to the Eyrie, and she says, yes, I will pledge my fealty to you. You don't know. I mean, we know that it's unlikely she's going to do anything, but they don't know that.
Right. And literally, she would be perfectly reasonable in believing that she owes fealty to Joffrey Baratheon.
Right, sure.
He did seem to everybody else as the next king.
Yep.
It's not treasonous to believe what you actually believe.
Yeah. I mean,
might be
it's not
wrong.
like it's been verified and spread around the realm, you know?
Right. So we do get to meet Melisandre, who's beautiful and mysterious. She clearly has some magical powers. She can drink poison.
Apparently.
She apparently can see the future in the fires, or at least she says she can. How much of that is magic and how much of it is telling your boss what he wants to hear, of course.
That is the question, isn't it? She does seem to find things so far that really suit what he would like to hear.
Exactly.
So there's a few options here with the poison. Either she saw the poison coming, like maybe in the fire. Maybe she saw this whole thing coming in the fire and was prepared and took an antidote prior to dinner. Or maybe she pulled a Wesley from Princess Bride and has built up a tolerance to this this poison. Or maybe she's telling the truth and R'hllor helped her survive this.
Yeah, and that was my interpretation, because for me the glowing of the ruby at her throat was kind of like R'hllor's power neutralizing the poison as it went down. That's what I saw.
What you didn't see was the wire going down through her clothes down to her hand, and she was pressing a button to light it up. But I will say that Thoros of Myr is also a priest of R'hllor, and maybe he can survive where he shouldn't as well. We don't know a whole lot about Thoros of Myr yet, but he did win the melee in the Hands Tourney, so, you know, he survived that. And according to Tywin, he survived the mountain's ambush on the on his and Beric Dondarrion's party when you know, a lot of them were wiped out. So,
and if I recall, there was rumors of his bravery in the Siege of Pike as well.
Right? He was first through.
With
yeah,
the
right.
sword. So yeah.
Although,
this R'hllor, he's got some power.
I guess so. Although I do question Cresson's planning when he used a poison from a plant grown near a Shai to kill someone from a Shai. I mean, maybe she knew the signs of its presence in wine or something, you know? Like, there's got to be other poisons she could have used. Why use the one from her hometown?
Right. She's totally used. It's like trying to get me. It's trying to kill me by having depressing weather. I'm English. Totally used to it. Never going to work.
Great analogy. Well done.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me that Selyse Baratheon seems to be the character most influenced by Melisandre.
Right.
Melisandre obviously has some feminine charms, and that might, even Stannis might be swayed by those, given how fun Selyse is. But Selyse is the one who seems to be the most ardent for this new religion.
Right. At this point, Stannis seems to have no interest in it.
Right. He just likes what he's hearing from Melisandre.
Right. So far, yeah.
Not that he's bought into the religion.
But this is the part where I was just really bummed to hear how harsh Stannis was to the man who, according to Cresson, raised him and loved him like a son.
Well, brace yourself, Lewis.
Right.
Because there's more where this came from.
In front of everyone, for all to hear, he says, "You're too ill and confused to be of use to me, old man. Pylos will counsel me henceforth. He already works with the ravens since you can no longer climb to the rookery. I will not have you kill yourself in my service," which is actually what he does. Like a few minutes later, he kills himself to try and save Stannis. And earlier, when poor Cresson had to climb all those stairs to get to the room with the painted table where Stannis was, he gets, Cresson gets up there and he says, once you would have woken me. And he says, once you were young, now you're old and sick and need your sleep. But, Lewis, I think maybe it's possible that Stannis was trying to be caring and just awful at expressing it.
I guess that's where you were headed with that. Yeah, you could interpret that as rough love. It's kind of like...
I thought about how he might have rephrased it. Would you like to hear?
Go on.
He could have maybe said something like this. Cresson, unfortunately, you're no longer able to provide the services that are needed by a man in my new station as king. So Pylos will be my lead counsel going forward. I'm sorry. He already works with the Ravens since you can't climb the rookery, and I couldn't bear it if something happened to you on my account. Platitudes, thank yous, and so forth. And
honestly, what you've done is you've convinced me of Stannis' right to the throne. Because what he said, what you said was just so mealy-mouthed, so annoying. I'm with Stannis now. Stannis is my man.
He's talking to the man who has been there for him through thick and thin. Shouldn't he have a little bit of compassion for him?
But the fool's crown on Cresson's head.
Yeah, that one's hard to. There's not a lot of excuses I can come up with for that one.
Yeah. So just before we get to background, one of the things that gets mentioned early on is I think Cresson is talking to Shireen, and he tells her that the corner of a castle needs a tower.
Yeah.
Wherever two walls meet, need a tower.
I didn't know this either. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, I did a little bit of looking up on that. And basically, there's two reasons for a corner tower. The corner is more vulnerable. On a straight section of wall, as a defender, you can defend directly in front of you, and you've got a person to your left and right there doing the same, so everything's good. But on the corner, you potentially have attackers coming from two directions. Yeah, from in front of you and your left, or in front of you and your right. Furthermore, if an attacker does manage to mount the wall at the corner, he himself is less vulnerable because he can put his back to the corner.
Right.
So he's fighting 90 degrees rather than if someone climbs the wall in the middle of the wall, he's got to fight 180 degrees.
I getcha. Yeah.
The second reason is if the tower bulges out, then you could have archery slots which will allow you to fire enfilade.
Ooh, fancy word.
Yes. Fancy word. I discovered this word in my research. Basically, shooting enfilade is shooting along the long axis of the force you're up against. So basically, if they're coming side by side, enfilade is from the side. If they're coming single file, enfilade is from the front.
Right.
Basically, if you miss the first guy, you hit the second guy. That's what enfilade
I get you.
is.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I would just like to mention in passing, I wrote this down, and 12 hours later, I was watching a TV show that said the word enfilade.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, get out.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard that word before either. Enfilade.
12 hours later. Yep. I was watching an episode of Battlestar Galactica, and they were sort of talking about walking through these trees, and they said, I'm really worried about enfilade fire.
Huh. How about that?
Weird world.
See, what happened was you weren't exposed to the term. Once you became exposed to it,
I'd probably been hearing it every day until that point.
Right.
You're going to start hearing it from now on, too.
I guess so.
But that is why a corner does need a tower. Well, for one reason it needs a tower, and for one reason it's very useful to have a tower.
Yes.
But the tower has to bulge away from the wall in order to make that enfilade shot available.
I get it. Makes sense now.
All right, so you got some background?
Yeah, I thought we'd do another geography lesson.
Oh, goody.
So there are 4 lords' houses mentioned in this chapter. We have Lord Valerian, Celtigar, Bar Emmon, and Sunglass. Axel Florent is also present. Axel Florent is Selyse's uncle. I'm sorry, Selyse's father.
He's there? Her father? I missed that entirely.
It's only mentioned when Cresson is looking at all the lords at the table dressed so fancy. He mentions Axel Florent wearing whatever he was wearing. I don't recall.
Right.
But
clothes, yeah.
He was wearing clothes to my knowledge. So the seats of the 4 houses minus the Florent house are all along what's known as the Gullet, which is the opening of land between Blackwater Bay and the Narrow Sea. So you've got the Celtigars. They come from Claw Isle, which is off Cracklaw Point Peninsula. There's a peninsula called Cracklaw Point. They're just off of that. Then we've got House Valerian. They're from Driftmark, which is an isle just south of Dragonstone. Bar Emmon is from an area called Sharp Point, which is at the tip of an area called Massey's Hook. And then Sunglass, they're Their home is a place called Sweetport Sound, but oddly, no location has ever been provided for where that is. So if you think of Blackwater Bay as an alligator's mouth,
Yep,
Claw Isle is off the nose, which is where the Celtigars are from. Then Dragonstone and Driftmark are kind of floating around in the middle of the mouth. And then Massey's Hook would be like the lower jaw, and Sharp Point, which is where Bar Emmon is from, will be like the front tooth of that lower jaw.
Very nice.
They're kind of the barrier areas that feed from the... I'm using arm gestures, so that's great. Feed from the narrow sea into Blackwater Bay.
I got you. So thank you. That's very useful geography. I like it. Selyse Florent. So House Florent is a major house from the Reach. So they owe their fealty to the Tyrells. This goes to what we were talking about earlier. Their home is Brightwater Keep on the western side of the Reach. Their sigil is a fox surrounded by blue flowers. The Florents were a more prominent house than the Tyrells until Aegon the Conqueror. The Florents fought alongside the royal family of the Reach, the Gardeners, and Aegon killed all the Gardeners and raised the Tyrells to lordship to the dismay of the Florents. So basically there's a little bit of a 300-year-old grudge here between the Florents and the Tyrells, which basically is the Florents feel like they should be the lords of the Reach, and they're not because of the Targaryens. The assumption for this was that it was for taking up arms against the Targaryens, and so it does create this interesting backdrop. The Tyrells have sided with Renly. Where will the Florents' allegiance lie? They owe allegiance to the Tyrells, but they can't be too thrilled with that. And if Stannis Baratheon can offer them lordship of the Reach again, that could actually bring them to his side. The problem is that that's 2,000 swords, and it cuts off forever the chance of getting the Tyrells on your side, and they're 10 times the size.
Yep.
Yeah.
Therein lies the problem.
Yeah. We did mention this earlier in a Ned chapter when we were giving some background. At Selyse and Stannis' wedding, Robert Baratheon deflowered one of Selyse's cousins, Delena Florent. Because she was a noble virgin, the rules dictate that Robert had to recognise the bastard that was the unsurprising outcome of that union. The child's name is Edric Storm, and he was mentioned when Ned was listing Robert's known offspring. I think we know that he lives at Storm's End.
Yes.
That much we know about.
I think Ned may have mentioned that in that chapter.
So, comparison with the television show. It is not the first scene of the second season. It's about 25 minutes into the first episode of the second season.
Oh, okay.
The early part of this chapter is quite different in the TV show. We meet Cresson on the beach when Melisandre is overseeing the burning of the statues of the seven gods in favour of the Lord of Light. Davos Seaworth has not been out diploming. He's here on the beach watching the bonfires. We don't meet Selyse or Shireen at this point. Well, actually, we do see Selyse on the beach, but she doesn't speak, so you wouldn't know it was her. It's just, I looked it up, and the woman who walked across scene at one point was supposed to be Selyse. So
okay.
We don't meet Patchface, and I don't think we ever meet Patchface. I think he was written out of the TV show.
All right.
Pylos is also dropped. No mention of him. On the beach, Cresson tries to reason. We were all raised in the light of the Seven. And Melisandre mocks him, says, "You stink of fear." Cresson and Stannis don't have a one-on-one at any point, so Cresson is not disrespected in the same way he was in the book. Stannis dictates a harshly written missive claiming the throne to be sent to every major family in Westeros, and everyone is present in the room except Selyse. He eschews the help of all the usurpers to his throne, Renly and Robb. There's no discussion of Shireen going to the Eyrie. And as an aside, the letter is transcribed by Mathos Seaworth, Davos' son, although that's not made clear at the time. Again, you wouldn't know that just from watching it, but the person writing the letter down as Stannis dictates is Davos' son.
Okay. Interesting.
Davos is the one who makes the Lannisters are the true enemy gambit. Stannis says, when Eddard Stark learned the truth, he told only me.
Ah.
So in the TV show, they make it clear he got this information from Ned.
Okay.
But that's interesting to me because I didn't think that the message had got to him in the TV show either. But maybe it's different. Maybe I'm forgetting the TV show now. Anyway, what I mean is I'm forgetting the how the scene broke down when Ned was captured.
Right. Yeah.
I guess his messenger got away, basically, in the TV show.
I guess.
Yeah. The scene with the wine is just a continuation of the same scene with the letter writing. So the Cresson never goes off. He's got that pouch of poison with him all along.
Okay.
It is in the chamber of the painted table. The painted table room is not quite as written. There's a big table, which is the map of Westeros, and one throne, which is where Dragonstone is, looking over the whole thing.
Right. A raised seat.
Raised seat, yeah. In the TV show, it is the table as described, but they just sit around it.
Okay, like it's like table height.
A big
Everybody
table,
just sits around.
A big dinner table, exactly, yeah. Davos does try to stop Cresson. Cresson drinks the wine first to demonstrate that it's safe. But what's interesting is, as he passes the wine to Melisandre, she looks at it a little bit suspiciously, and then he kind of clutches the table, and then his nose starts to bleed, and then she drinks it down anyway, because she is just a badass.
Because she is just saying, yeah, I know this is poison,
exactly.
And I don't care. Now, so in the TV show then, Stannis still disavows any idea of, or discards any idea of getting help from Robb, because Robb is, even though he's acknowledging the fact that Ned is the one that gave him the information about Joffrey.
Correct, sir. But I think I think he would feel a little bit of a twinge of, well, I owe them something.
Right. Yes. In that instance, we know for a fact he got the info that he's the king from Ned Stark. Exactly. And Ned Stark possibly died
with
because
his life.
of it.
Exactly, yeah.
He might owe Robb at least help until the Lannisters are taken care of. Cool. Good stuff.
So pedantry, I mean, just Mr. Martin, please, that's too long for our podcast. Have some consideration, man. And then just one other thing. So that was his half-hearted attempt to stop the poisoning of Stannis' trusted advisor, Melisandre.
Yeah.
You should, if you believe that's about to happen and you are Stannis' man, you should really try.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because I read it there, and right before Cresson gets up to go poison Melisandre, he's talking to Davos, and Davos says that we're all on fool's business, that the Red Woman saw victory in the flames, so Stannis plans to press on without numbers. Likely we'll all end up like Patchface at the bottom of the sea. So maybe he half-heartedly tried to stop him and then was like, if it works, we're better off for it.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what he was thinking. It's just Stannis does not really go in for that kind of moral ambiguity.
True. Yes, you're right.
He likes his straight shooters,
Yeah. Oh, one thing I meant to mention back in background when you were talking about Selyse Florent's family is that Selyse is related to Sam Tarly.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, her uncle Alistair, the head of House Florent, is Sam's grandfather through Sam's mother, Melissa.
Huh. Excellent.
So, there you go.
Very good to know. Thank you.
Anyway, I was just going to mention that it's not really pedantry, but does it seem odd that the Valyrians chose the gloomy, barren, ash-filled island of Dragonstone as their summer home? I mean, Valyria it seems like an Atlantis-type place, and they build a castle on this gloomy rock in the middle of the narrow sea. Maybe they wanted to rough it. That maybe they were tired of all the luxuries of the Valyrian freehold.
Throwing something out, the dragons liked the volcano.
Could be. The dragons picked it.
Right. I don't know. That does seem a bit odd to me too. I mean, you've flown 80% of the way to Westeros and you stop on the most barren, inhospitable bit of Westeros
Right.
and decamp there for years, you know?
Yeah, it's like they have dragons. They could choose any location they want
Exactly.
on Westeros.
And
We're taking this
What
now.
are the dragons going to eat on Dragonstone? I mean, are you going to have to fish for the dragons? Good point. News and notes?
Well, we got very kind words and a comment from a listener on our YouTube, one of our YouTube videos, from a listener named Slate. And Slate binged all 70 episodes and is now caught up. Loves our thoroughness for each chapter. Appreciates Pedantry Corner. He too, like some of our other listeners, went looking for a podcast to help in preparation for Winds of Winter.
Yeah.
So... And he also loves the intro part of the podcast where we just chit-chat for a bit.
Which is good to hear feedback on that, because we often worry about that. That we're just,
We do.
We're just two dudes gossiping and, like, is anybody actually interested in that? So thank you, Slate. We appreciate that.
Yes, thank you very much. And
All
I'm
right.
sorry it took me a week to respond. I did not see that comment there, so I apologize.
We need to wrap this up, because we've got
Oh,
lives
we
to get
do.
back to. What an awesome start, though. I mean, man, I just loved this, because the thing is, knowing the whole story, I'm using air quotes now, I know how much more there is than what we got in Game of Thrones, you know? So to have this whole new crop of characters be added to the mix is just so exciting. And the whole thing, it's like a mini novel. This
It is.
Like,
it's a novella of...
I cannot get over that it was 72
Wisdom?
minutes in the audiobook. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, we do meet Stannis. He's as cheerless as we feared.
Yeah.
And he did give off a great first impression, if I'm being honest. Cresson said he thinks that this isn't like Stannis. So maybe Stannis is being influenced by others, such as his wife and Melisandre. But he came off as quite cruel and spiteful, especially to a man who raised and supported him. That was rough.
Yeah.
Didn't give me the warm and fuzzies for Stannis. Yeah. But Lewis, I will keep an open mind as we read going forward.
So do we think that Stannis would consider killing his brother? I would like to say here that this is the quintessential sort of Macbethian thing. The witches tell Macbeth that he will be king, and so he goes and kills the king. Melisandre has seen Renly's death in the fire. As Stannis, you don't have to do anything. It's been seen. It's foretold. You don't have to raise your hand against him now.
Yeah, you're helpless to stop it. It's right. It's in the cards for your poor younger brother.
Exactly. And I mean, obviously he thinks he's the king, and obviously he's not very forgiving of anything. So is he capable of that? Of fratricide in this case? I fear that he might be.
We'll see. Maybe he will race to his brother's rescue. I don't know. We'll have to see, I guess.
Yeah.
Although Stannis' solid influences dwindled a bit in this prologue here, because Cresson seemed like a positive, common sense, solid influence on Stannis, and now he's gone.
But Pylos doesn't seem too... I mean, Pylos doesn't seem rotten, just...
Right.
Maybe not
just caught in the middle. He was sent to do a job, so now he's going to do it. He does, and Stannis does so have Davos. Davos seems like different than the other lords that were at that table.
Right. He at least thought about trying to stop him from killing Melisandre, and concluded that we'd be better off if Melisandre was dead.
Give it a shot, see how it goes.
And we'll mourn Cresson, because he was a good character for his short, but he's the traditional prologue sacrifice.
Yes, we're 2 for 2 so far. Yeah. We'll have to see in Storm of Swords if we get a third. Then we've got a trend going on here.
As always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and as Slate knows, YouTube.
That's right. And if you wouldn't mind going out and giving us a 5-star rate and or a really great review, we certainly would appreciate that.
We would. Well, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.